Good afternoon, Kent State University. Thank you for joining us as we share the final report of the 2021 climate study, which focused on race. You may be aware that in 2016, Kent State utilized an external organization, Rankin and Associates, to lead the 2016 climate study. That climate study identified the challenges that our faculty, staff, students at the regional and Kent campus face, and we created particular subcommittees to just address those challenges. So we had subcommittees from the 2016 climate study that focused on faculty, staff, students, as well as ad hoc on race and disability, as well as a subcommittee on the regional campus. The Great Place Initiative was charged out of that 2016 climate study, and some great work happened at Kent State that really advanced access, that advanced equity, that advanced diversity and inclusion, and ultimately making Kent State such a dynamic and better place to be. And we're so thankful for the work of that 2016 climate study and for all that participated on the Great Place Initiative subcommittee. The 2021 climate study we utilized an internal source or research lab in the Department of Sociology, and they provided great support in advancing this climate study. We did use questions from that 2016 climate study. This climate study, the 2021 climate study, really focused on race in the way that the 2016 climate study did not. And the focus on race was really inspired by the experiences of our faculty, staff, students of color that had indicated in the 2016 climate study that they're experiencing challenges around sense of belonging, around lack of access. It was also inspired by the racial reckoning of 2020. And I'm so thankful that we have with us Doctors Akbar, Monroe Stasic, and Hamilton, who really led the effort for this 2021 climate study with a dynamic team, and they will share with us that the information from the final report. So I will turn it over to them.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Gooden. I'm going to start off the presentation. I'm going to wait for the PowerPoint to load up before I get going here. But as you learned, I'm Dr. Mandy Monroe Stasic. I'm the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. Very, very happy to be here with you this afternoon. I had the pleasure of co-chairing this process with NJ and Robert, who were wonderful colleagues to work on in order to be able to do this. Can we get this in presentation mode?
Are you not seeing it, Mandy? I'm sharing.
I'm seeing the slides on the side as well. It's not in presentation mode. I don't know what Mwaba, NJ, Robert, how were you seeing it?
I was seeing presentation mode.
I saw presentation mode.
Okay, I'll deal. Just put it back up. It's totally fine. I'll make it work. Great. Yeah, thank you.
Can you see it now, Mandy?
Hasn't populated yet.
Try it, Granbury. No, it's not up yet.
Oh, goodness. Oh, here we go. How about now?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. Can you go to the next slide? Brilliant. All right, so I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview before we get moving here. And Mwaba already gave you a little bit. As you heard already, this is the second university-wide climate study that's been conducted at Kent State University. So like the 2016 survey, this was designed to assess the overall climate on all of our campuses and measure any changes that may have occurred since 2016. This particular survey, as Mwaba already indicated, focused more specifically on race. So we ask questions about racialized topics and events to help us understand our community's reactions and feelings to those events. We also analyze the responses by race and by other demographics to determine how individual groups felt about the climate in general at Kent State. As we kind of give that overview, I want you to note that as we present the results, you're going to see some things that are aggregated at the university level. And then you're going to see some things that are broken down by different demographic groups. So I want you to be kind of cognizant of what we're showing you as we're showing you some of these data sets. Sometimes we're going to be giving you broad brushstrokes, and sometimes we're going to be giving you some more specifics. But whatever we present to you, it's always done in such a way that we're preserving anonymity. So notably, this particular survey was conducted during the pandemic, where we all know that anxieties were already a little high. Nonetheless, the overall response rate for this particular survey was 17.9%, which initially felt kind of low to me, but I am told that this was considerably higher than the response rate for all the other university surveys that were being implemented at the same time. So we should be proud of this. So again, all the data that we're going to share with you today are done in such a way to protect an individual's identity. Next slide, please. In terms of the demographics, we had a total of 5,635 responses. You can see that in the total of the table at the bottom there. The majority of the individuals that responded were undergraduate students, and the majority of them were freshmen. However, if you look at the response rate, which is the fourth column right in the middle of this table, you can actually see that undergraduate students had the lowest response rate. And as you go up to graduate students, it increased to about 16%. When you go to faculty, it went up to 33.7%. And staff had the highest response rate at 42.8%. So almost half of the staff at the university who received the survey responded to it. So you can start seeing in some areas, we had some really phenomenal response rates. Next slide, please. In terms of the process of putting this together, it really was quite similar to what we did in 2016. It was really important to us that we solicited input from the Kent State community at large to design and deploy the survey, figure out what it was that we wanted to ask, and then we used the survey results and analyzed them for about 1.5 years to look for issues and bright spots and things like that that were shown up within our data. We're now in the process of handing this data off to existing committees on campus to make and implement recommendations. And so this go-around, this process is now closer to about 2 years, as opposed to the 2016 climate survey process, which was about a 5-year process. We tried to do the analysis a little bit quicker than we did the last time. Next slide, please. I wanted to do a special thank you to Gregory Gibson from sociology, faculty member in sociology, and Timothy Rose, who was a PhD student at the time of deploying the survey, designing and deploying it. He's now graduated. They were my co-chairs in the survey design subcommittee. We had many other folks help us throughout this process, and we have a full listing of all our committees at the end so that you can see the total number of people who actually helped us deploy and analyze this survey. Next slide, please. The survey was essentially sent to our entire university community. Every single person who was designated as a Kent State employee, staff member, or student received this survey. The survey was designed to be completed within about 15 minutes, unless you decided to write a lot in the open-ended responses. The majority of the questions were Likert scale, so they were able to be answered super quickly. Each Likert scale question was followed by an open-ended response. We ensured that we kept a handful of really important questions that we felt were on the 2016 survey so that we could benchmark these responses in 2021 to the responses in 2016 and basically measure how we changed over time. The other thing that was really different about this and really focused on the race question was that we added a couple of scenario or vignette questions around 2 incidents that happened around the time that we deployed the survey. One of them was specifically on Kent State campus. So we could try to figure out how our community responded to this particular incident on the campus. And that was when there was graffiti sprayed onto the rock on front campus at Kent campus. And then a national event as well that occurred. But I will let NJ actually speak about that in a little bit more detail when he goes on to speak about the qualitative analysis. I am going to pass this over to Robert, who's going to tell you a little bit about the quantitative results.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, Bree. I'm Robert Hamilton, co-chair of the Quantitative Analysis team. Our main responsibilities were to analyze the Likert style questions and the percent answer questions. I was greatly assisted and have a thank you for Bhathi Castillo-Archie, for Quantitative Analysis co-chair Kathy Du Bois, Jen Newberger, and Gina Campagna. Others did help too, but special shout out to these 4 individuals. Next slide, please. So the 4 benchmark questions that Mandy mentioned, these were questions that were included in both the 2016 and 2021 climate study surveys that we could use to measure differences between groups over time. And the 4 questions are listed here. They were, how comfortable are you with the overall climate at Kent State University? How comfortable are you with the climate in either your classes, department, or unit, depending on whether you were student, faculty, or staff? Have you ever seriously considered leaving Kent State? And have you ever experienced any exclusionary behavior? And these benchmark questions were analyzed in both aggregated and disaggregated forms, meaning we know the responses of all respondents across the university on specific campuses, Kent campus, regional campus, across colleges, across divisions, faculty only, students only. So in a few minutes, I'm going to show you just a few samples of this very large data set to show you what types of data we have. Next slide, please. So this is a combined data set that has responses of students, faculty, and then staff and administrators only on the Kent campus. And these are responses to the 4 benchmark questions sorted by race, ethnicity, and gender. And this particular data set shows groups that had above average positive experiences, meaning if you take the average score, response scores to the 4 benchmark questions, these are the groups that responded above average. And you see it compares 2016 to 2021. So there are 4 columns across the top. Overall climate, in class, department, or unit, seriously considered leaving, and experienced exclusionary behavior. Those are the 4 benchmark questions. Then it has the groups in 2016 that had above average responses. Then the groups in 2021 that had above average responses. And they're coded green. Almost in shorthand, you can just think the more green we see, the better. Next slide, please. Then this is the same data set, students, faculty, staff, and administrators from the Kent campus only. That data set has the 4 benchmark questions. However, this is the counterpart to the slide that was green. These are the groups that responded either in yellow, where they said they were comfortable with the respective climates, but on average, less comfortable than the average response. Certainly less than the green responses. And then red are groups that said they had negative experiences related to climate. And just as the shorthand with the green slide, the more green, the better. The more yellow, the more red, the opposite of better or worse. Next slide, please. Then here is a data set, some of our disaggregated data, This shows staff and administrative responses only to the 4 benchmark questions. It has Kent campus overall, regional campus overall, then the 12 university divisions. If you look in the left column, it says divisions with the number 12 in parentheses, and it has A through L. Those are the university divisions. We have them anonymized here, so their identities are hidden, because later on, one of the next steps, we're going to talk to all of the university divisions, all the campuses and colleges, and present this data to them in a confidential manner. But once again, this is a summary data set of staff and administration responses to the 4 benchmark questions by division. We also have a faculty version of this, a student version of this, and we also have the 13 university colleges. And at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to NJ, who will talk more about the qualitative data. Next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Robert. And so I had the pleasure to co-chair and the qualitative analysis team and work really closely with Kristen Compton from Communication Studies and Connor Wilcox, also from Communication Studies, who did the lion's share of the analysis. And really bring forth some contextual information to what people thought around race. And so if you go to the next slide, Bree, please. We really looked at 4 areas. As Mandy mentioned, there were questions that also asked for people to provide more context and why. And so one of the questions was, have you seriously considered leaving? And why? And so we analyzed those responses. We also had a question around whether or not the respondents thought that campus was effectively addressing racism currently. And then we had 2 other questions that were more vignettes. As Mandy mentioned, one focused on whether or not campus perspectives were shaped by things that happened on campus. And so the graffiti on the rock in fall of 2020 was a scenario mentioned with questions. And then secondarily, there was national perspectives on racism and whether or not there were issues around the LeBron James incident with the media, and whether or not that had an impact on campus. And you can go to the next slide, please. So the first one was, have you seriously considered leaving and why? There was over 1,200 responses to this question. And really we can, for all categories, we can say there was 3 commonalities for all categories. In 2016, we were only able to analyze student responses. In 2021, we were able to analyze both student responses and faculty and staff responses, which we lumped into as employees, and we lumped them together. And so the 3 commonalities were around financial reasons, mental health, and sense of belonging for both students and employees. While there was also for students, there was also academic reasons. And so the differences between students and employees were tuition and financial aid for students, for example, and salary and benefits being the financial reasons for employees. Overall, there was a strong desire to have more accessibility and availability to mental health resources, and also being able to understand how do you engage or enact those resources, because there was also some confusion around how do I actually access them. Also, there was a strong feeling by both students and faculty and staff was being undervalued. And their negative interactions for employees around administration and their supervisors were reasons why they considered leaving. For students, it was a strong sense around faculty interactions, having negative faculty interactions that led to their reason for wanting to leave. The last thing is there was a strong sense that their contributions in the classroom, as the students, were undervalued. So if you go to the next slide. Here you'll see, some sample responses here on the left-hand side, but on the right-hand side, you will see some major takeaways. And so the biggest thing is, students had a significant amount of their remarks was around negative interactions with faculty. So I think that's something to point out, and hopefully something that we can address and do something about. The other piece of it is there was some job insecurity from employees, wondering what would happen coming out of the pandemic. So if you look at the two examples there, I won't read all of them, but one of them at the top from the graduate student who also was a professional on campus talked about being mistreated by their white peers because they made them feel uncomfortable. And then also not having their contributions valued in the classroom also contributed to some stereotype threat and loss of confidence there. If we go to the next slide, please. Also, the second area was around whether or not KSU effectively addressed racism. This is where we had the bulk of the responses. We had more than 2,200 responses to this question, and the responses were mixed. While we did get some nice amount of responses that talked about racism being addressed effectively, there were also many others that said they could not determine whether it was effective or ineffective. While there were some who thought that racism was a problem, but it was hard to address. And if we go to the next slide, one of the things that also is important to note is that there were differences between who actually responded. And so Mandy mentioned where we break down some of the differences. Here's one of those examples. And so Black and Latinx students or Latin students felt that extensively that racism in the classroom was something that they did not think was addressed effectively. While white students barely wrote any observations of racism in the classroom, but they did say that some of them did report that they observed some from happening against Black students. Overall, whether it was about race or not, there were quite a bit of comments around things being unaddressed in the classroom, as well as faculty and staff also wrote that that we should really look into non-white employees when they're leaving, especially when the large numbers are leaving specific departments. And if you look at the left-hand side with the different examples, I think that the bottom example is a good example of what we heard around a staff member, cisgender on campus, mentioning that you should look into situations where the department manages to dispatch every non-white person within the last few years. And so that's something to take a look at. Next slide, please. And here's where we get into the vignettes. And so the first vignette, as I mentioned, was in fall 2020, when there was a Black Lives Matter note or written on the rock. As you know, our students really take pride in that. And then there were other remarks that were written on top of that, graffiti. And for this, we had over 1,700 responses. And overall, there was, again, some mixed responses, but one of the things that was not so mixed was a lot of people had negative reactions to it. That they thought it was just, they were disgusted when they heard about it. They were angered. Also, there was a thought that the social and political climate at the state and national levels may have added an impact on why people felt justified in actually doing the graffiti. And then the other piece of it is that there were some individuals, quite a bit, who felt like this incident in of itself actually contributed to why they considered leaving. They felt like they felt safe before this incident, where this incident questioned whether or not they were safe in this environment. They also, students questioned whether or not that they actually made the right decision when they enrolled here. And so, as you probably remember, that this incident happened pretty much at the beginning of the school year. And so the bulk of the students, as Mandy mentioned, were first-time freshmen on our campus. And so it's no wonder why that might be something that come out. If you go to the next slide, please. Again, we show some examples on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, I just want to point out here that, again, the responses were mixed. There were some people who thought that the response from campus was too strong or inadequate, but there were also many people who thought that they were satisfied with the immediate actions that the campus took. The one good thing about this question is we got a significant amount of suggestions on how we can actually make the campus better. So there were some discussed and some concerns written, but there also was many suggestions for what we can do better. And so one of those things was ensuring that we can incorporate topics and listening skills in the classroom as an example. And you see here on the left-hand side with some examples. This is a common response to when asked, what was your immediate response when you heard about it? A graduate agent student mentioned that they were heartbroken and felt defeated and tired. And so that was a common response as an example. Next slide, please. And we'll go to the last qualitative analysis question, which was whether or not there was a national impact on campus perspectives around race. And so there were 1,700 responses for this question. And again, we looked at the 2018 incident that made national news. And we asked students to tell us, and faculty and staff respondents to tell us how did they feel about learning about this event. And what were their thoughts? And so individuals, again, were divided. We got the disgust and anger and horrified comments as well. But some saw it as an interpretation of the way in which the larger society has viewed race and the issues we have around race. And even saw some connections to the way in which they experience race on campus. Go to the next slide, please. And so here you will see, again, some examples on the left-hand side. But one of the takeaways we wanted to point out is that respondents thought that everyone deserved to have a voice. There was a large amount of respondents who really shared the need that everyone should have a voice. However, more than I wanted, or than I think we wanted to see, is that there was a thought that celebrities and athletes should stay in their lane and shouldn't be speaking out on these type of topics. And unfortunately, there was also some responses around not being sure whether or not the commentators' remarks that LeBron James should shut up and dribble were even racist. And I think that just illuminated the greater need for us as a community to understand how systemic racism has its impact, and we can have some educational outreach. And so if you look at the bottom bubble here, a white graduate student who was 100% online said that this incident itself just made them feel like it was one more piece of the constant drip of intolerance towards other people's views and underlies racism that we have not dealt with. And so that was an example of a response. And so these were some of the qualitative responses, and look forward to reading even more examples in the full report. And so I'll turn it back over to Mandy.
Thanks, NJ. So I'm going to just give you a sort of a high-level summary of where we sort of stand with everything that we shared with you today. So next slide, please. One of the things that I think is really important to understand is that when we do climate surveys, we're often looking for those negative things that impact us so that we can actually fix them and make them better. So we don't often highlight the bright spots that come out of a climate survey. So I want to just make sure that everybody understands that if we were to like take a very broad brushstroke across everything that we saw in this climate survey, the climate at Kent State is actually really quite good. And I think that's a really important thing for you all to understand before we start dissecting this down a little bit. That are generally very high levels of comfort with the climate overall. And there are things such as a lot of people decided to leave at some point in time, but then they came back because they realized how amazing it was at Kent State. And so I wanted to highlight that as well, so that you're not all thinking about the negative things and the things that we need to fix. So the other things that we sort of need to think about kind of moving forward here is that in the big picture, the climate has decreased ever so slightly since 2016. So overall, people are not feeling quite, or were not feeling quite as good in 2021 as they were in 2016. And that's not shocking because of the effects of the pandemic. In terms of the big picture, across the board, those things that kind of popped up as being problematic were things like pay discrepancy or low pay for staff, or perceived low pay for staff, lack of sense of belonging for students, and then students having poor interactions with faculty. These were some of the things that sort of popped up that I think that we really need to sort of work on moving forward. However, I want to like dive a little deeper and sort of look at some very specific groups and highlight some of the results that we shared with you today. I think it's really important to note that there are several groups on our campus that experience significantly less favorable climate than others. And I'm just going to list them off because it's easier to do that. Trans-spectrum students, staff and faculty, Black students, staff and faculty, Asian and Asian American faculty, and multiracial and Latin and Hispanic students. Those are the groups that were disproportionately having a lesser experience, didn't feel so comfortable on our campus than everyone else. If we were to flip this and look at, say, all the white respondents in the climate survey, the white respondents, the climate actually improved for them. In general, if you were white, you tended to say that you were feeling a little better about things at Kent State than you were in 2016. And if you were white male, that was even more pronounced. So I wanted to sort of share that, so to show you that there is a discrepancy between different populations on our campus. When we look more deep into our results as well, it's particularly clear that those events that occur very close to home have a profound effect on our communities. So the Campus Rock incident was deeply upsetting, especially to our minoritized populations whose sense of belonging and well-being were absolutely profoundly impacted by this event. So we need to be very cognizant when these kinds of things happen to be able to outreach to our colleagues and to our students and make sure that they're all doing well under these circumstances. Next slide, please. So we wanted to share some of the next steps. So this is a very high-level presentation with summary results. This presentation will become available to you all on the website, and then there will be a full report that will detail all of our results, and that will be available for everybody to see within the month as well. The most important thing is that we are also going to allow you to do deeper dives. And if we can go to the next slide, I'll pass it back to NJ and he can explain that in a little bit more depth.
Yes, and so each and every one of you have an option to, now that you've heard the data that we've given out, there will be much more in the final report, but you also have an opportunity to ask or request a deeper dive into the data that we did not look at. As you probably imagine, it's a large data set, and we have looked at a lot of it so far. And so until May 31st, we'll be accepting any deeper dive data requests. So if you can take out your phone now and snap the QR code, it will take you right to the form where you can complete it and let us know what information you need. The other piece of that is if you don't know exactly what you need or you're thinking about, but you want to talk it through, you also have the option of leaving your contact information and having someone contact you there as well. Mandy?
Yeah, so final slide. We just wanted to acknowledge everybody who worked on this climate survey. Here is the entire list of all of our committee members. They worked extremely hard. They worked in the 3 subcommittees that you learned about today. And some of them are not with us anymore, but and we added new people halfway through the process. But this is everybody that we worked with, and we just wanted to make sure that we acknowledged everybody who did the work on this particular survey. And with that, we will end it. And I think, shall I pass it back to you, Mwaba?
Sure, thank you. Bree, thank you so much for managing the slides. And Dr. Monroe-Staszek, Dr. Hamilton, and Dr. Akbar, thank you so much for your time and commitment over the last couple of years. As you know, I've heard this presentation a couple of times. Every time I hear it, I lean a little bit further into it, and a light bulb goes off. And as you're talking, I'm actually thinking about our employees, or staff and faculty, which are the human resources of our community, as well as our students. And actually just their sharing of their experiences and their stories, and the opportunity that we have to lean into those experiences a little bit more and wrap our arms around them so people feel safe and secure. So thank you very much. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to President Dyken, who has joined us, who will provide some brief remarks.
Thank you, Amwaba, and it's good to be here. I too have now heard this, I think, 4 times. And one of the things that I notice when I hear it each time is that the presenters today go out of their way to thank everyone else, but I want to thank them. So I want to thank Robert. I'm just reading these by the order of people. I'm seeing people on the screen, but I want to thank Robert, Mandy, and NJ, because you all are so good about thanking others, but I want to thank you for doing this work. You present this information well, and you present it clearly. And that's really important, because the strength of that presentation and the clarity of the presentation will help it be more actionable. So that's one thing that I really appreciate, and thank you for doing that. As I think about the political moment we occupy in the United States and in Ohio, I just keep going back to why do we do what we do? So why do we do that? Because we are an institution of access. As I like to say, we're a university, not just for the fortunate few, but the meritorious many. And we just need to keep to that. As Amwaba would say, we just need to lean into that mission and history. And that means that we accept students from all backgrounds with all kinds of strengths, but also all kinds of challenges. And then what's our commitment? Our commitment is that we will do everything we can to help them feel a sense of belonging, help them thrive, and help them graduate. And so, particularly as Senate Bill 83 makes its way through Columbus, the nomenclature might change, and actually the way that we are allowed to do the work might change, but what will never change is that we're still going to have that mission of access. We're still going to have that rock solid commitment to making Kent State the kind of comfortable place it is for people of all different backgrounds. And that's what it comes down to. So we'll keep doing the work, and we'll keep to that commitment. Although how and the names might change, but the bedrock won't change. So thanks, and also thank you, Vice President Gooden, for all the work that you do, and it's much appreciated. And it's good to see that so many people are on this call, and really makes my day to see that and to hear this presentation. So much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, President Dyken. So we are gonna, we actually have some time, 15 minutes for question and answers. You do have a Q&A button at the top of your screen. That's to remind us, please feel free to type a question, and Mandy, Robert, NJ, perhaps Todd and I will answer if we're able.
Thank you very much. Any questions? I don't see any in the
No, there are no
Q&A.
questions in the Q&A right now.
Right.
So probably I'll ask a question as individuals are thinking. So you've spent 2 years working on this climate study. If you were to think forward in a couple of years, where do you see Kent State in terms of responding to the data in the climate study?
I appreciate that question. I'll take a stab at it. First, I'll say that one of the biggest things that I think we have tried to do this time is to make the data as consumable as possible, and so that's why we've released it multiple times as it became available. And I think that that was important for us because we know people want to know how what is going on and then how to be better. And so what I see of Kent State is a campus that will continue, as President Dykert mentioned, the bedrock of our values, to live our values. But more importantly, I think you will see people from many different populations and perspectives and lived experiences coming here, having a voice. And feeling as though that their voice mattered. And so we'll hopefully see a change from that undervalued to one that's valued.
Thanks, NJ.
No problem.
Over to Mandy.
I can just segue on to what NJ said about, and President Dicon did say about data. Having looked at these data for years, there are a number of sensitive topics where a large percentage of the respondents said, I don't know, I'm not sure, I assume, I don't know how that community feels about this subject. Well, now with data such as these, they will know how that community feels. And, just getting the information out is a start before we can have actionable items.
I really like that, Robert, because we can have then use an evidence-based approach in actually responding to the responses.
Yes.
Yeah, great idea. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really important to me because being involved in both of the climate studies in some form or another, the first one really more through the Great Place Initiative after the fact. But a lot of what we saw in the first climate study showed up again in the second climate study. And for people who really know how things function, how things operate, for the most part, none of this is surprising, right? But our data is actually showing it. And for me, I wish that those folks that don't believe that there are any issues, that don't believe that different groups of people feel differently about things than other groups of people, I want them to really look at the data and look at it and see that it shows the same pattern over and over and over again. And once we're aware of the issue, it's hard to just fix it on the spot or anything like that. But once you're aware of it, you can at least work towards making things better, work towards, understanding that, a lot of the time some people are just completely oblivious to the things that are going on around them. And it's like, be oblivious or no, don't be oblivious. That's what I meant to say. And use your sphere of influence if you can to prevent things from happening. Some of the issues that I heard in the data set, especially when people make comments, it's really disheartening to hear, and we heard it the first time and we heard it the second time, that if students have negative interactions with faculty, in that faculty are not treating them well, then the chances of them leaving the university are really high. It's one of the first things that'll kind of push them out the door. And I don't even know if everybody even realizes that that happens. I don't even know if the individuals that are participating in that kind of behavior realize that the behavior is resulting in that kind of response. Now, in saying that, it's not pervasive. It's not everybody, you know, but there's I just want people to be really aware that words really matter. And you know, I wanted to sort of pull up this kind of this Maya Angelou quote that was pointed out to me before. I brought it up with NJ there a couple of weeks ago, that you know, and she said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how they made you feel. And I think that's really important. How did someone make you feel? Because that will stay with you forever, even if there was never any intent up front. So I want people to look at the data really carefully and see all of these things in there and see where they can see themselves in the data and see where there are opportunities to improve from looking at that data as well.
Okay, right. Thank you very much.
And I want, if I could interject just briefly, because I keep getting emails about this. People don't know how to do questions and answers. So it's not the regular chat bots that you're used to. If you go to the top of your Teams, you have the chat bots, you have people, raise hand function, view, and then Q&A is the one between view and apps. So if you go there, you can post your question there, and then Morgan or Bree will publish it or share it out publicly with us. Thank you.
We have like 3 questions. So Amanda, thank you, Amanda. Is there a timeline for when individual units will have the opportunity to meet to discuss unit-specific data?
So I think the timeline is probably going to start in the next fall. I'm thinking about it more in terms of colleges and things like that. And so it'll give us a little bit of time in the summer to put those individualized reports together, and we'll start meeting with people in the fall.
Thank you. Jennifer, thank you. Does the report contain more information on what not belonging looks like specifically? Are there plans to follow up on what that means to students, faculty, and staff?
So I appreciate that question. So the reports will just tell you what the people told us, so what respondents mentioned. So what it will do is you would see the way in which they were themed and categorized and what responses fall under that theme. And so you'll see some examples of those types of responses, but we aren't necessarily defining what belonging is not necessarily, but sharing what respondents said that made them not feel like they belonged, if that makes sense.
Thank you, NJ. And
You're
Lisa,
welcome.
thank you for the question. When is the next climate survey, and will it include topical questions such as what's happening on campus and in society? So the best practices for climate surveys are about 4 to 5 years. So we should be, oh my goodness, in another 2 years looking at another climate survey. I think using our climate surveys is a good way of benchmarking the progress that Kent State has made. So we want to make sure that we're responding to the data in this climate study, as well as considering the 2016 climate study as we create another climate study in a couple of years. Thank you for the question. And Motabo, thank you. Not a question, but an observation. It seems that SB 83's political social pushback against all Kent State has done to improve the climate for people of color, another marginalized group. In Africana studies, we provide information that empowers people to wake up from the imposed sleep that has been in existence for too long. Yes, we are woke and refuse to be put back down to sleep. Thank you, Motabo. Stay woke.
Hey, Amawaba, can I have one comment? There is one wrinkle to SB 83, which specifically, I guess I'm going to use the word exempts degree granting programs from any of these prescriptions. So Africana studies, for example, would not be restricted in any way.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, were there specific events or changes within the university in recent years that were cited in the responses as reasons why respondents felt more or less comfortable?
So we actually did not ask qualitative questions around that. So I'm not sure if, because we didn't prompt people to give us that information, I'm not sure if they gave us that. What we did get, though, in several of the different questions were the experiences people did have, especially around why you seriously considered leaving. There were some very specific examples and situations identified there of why people considered leaving, but we didn't ask to share why you felt comfortable or why you didn't feel as comfortable to provide contextual information for that.
Thank you. We'll take one final question. This is from Charles. Going forward with current events, both locally, nationally, and internationally, what ways do you see bridging the gap on student perspectives on how to handle these various situations, and how do we correct those that are the concern?
I'm just waiting for Mandy to respond. I don't know how to answer that one.
I feel like that's a job that would be coming out of DEI to a certain degree. It's a very complicated question because this, it infiltrates through our classrooms, it infiltrates through our workplaces, it infiltrates through our residence halls and things like that. So it's a very, very complex thing to address. But, I think the way that you worded this is really interesting, and I think it's something that we should be bringing to the committees that are going to be making very specific recommendations around these results. And I think this is a really nice way to think about it because, sometimes we don't necessarily always think about it this way.
And I would add too that when we think about diversity, that we should actually complicate it and provide the nuances. So diversity, in addition to race and gender, is political position, it's nationality, it's age, it's body size, it's weight. There's so many things that you can think about when that's folded into diversity. But in the US, we tend to lean into race and gender primarily. And I thank Charles for bringing in the international perspective in this. So we're so thankful that you could join us in sharing the final report out for the climate study. It will be available on the website, the climate study website. And we'll put that in the Q&A. Somebody can drop it in the Q&A. We'll also provide the PowerPoint will be up so you are able to review it on your own time. The recording will also be available. And please feel free to reach out to Drs. Monroe, Stazik, Hamilton, and Akbar just to give them show your appreciation for their effort in leading this for Kent State. Thank you. You make Kent State a better place. Take good care, everyone. Happy Wednesday afternoon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.